Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So this channel, Everyday Data Science, is all about trying to learn the different concepts involved in data science by practicing a lot of questions. In this video, I am going to solve this question on LeetCode regarding all people report to given manager and try to walk you through how we can develop solutions to such problems. The difficulty level of this question is medium, and this question has been asked in Google and Amazon interviews a couple of times in the last 1 year. Okay, so let's jump right in. We are given a table called employees with three different columns: employee ID, employee name, and manager ID, and these are their data types. Employee ID is the primary key for this table, and each row of this table indicates that an employee with an ID and the name reports his work to his or her direct manager, and the ID of the manager is given, and the head of the company is the person whose employee ID is 1. We are asked to write a SQL query to find employee ID of all the employees that directly or indirectly report their work to the head of the company. So directly means the employee is working directly under the head of the employee, like that is with employee ID 1. Indirectly means A works under B, which either works under the boss, that is employee ID 1, or A directly works under B, B directly works under C, and then C directly works under the boss. Like the loop can continue, right? So that is why here it is mentioned the indirect relation between managers will not exceed 3 managers as the company is small. Okay. So return the result table in any order. Okay, let's go through this example. So we are given a employees table with 3 different columns, and these are their data inside these columns. So if you see, employee ID 1 is because he is the head of the company. So employee ID 1, manager ID 1. Then Alice is her manager itself, so 3, and manager ID 3. Then Bob, so Bob works directly under the boss, right? Daniel works under Bob, and Bob works directly under manager, right? So see here we have an indirect relation. So let's see the output. So basically employee ID 2, since we need to output the employee IDs who work directly or indirectly under the head of the company, right? So employee ID 2, so they work directly. 77, Robert works directly under the under the boss. 4, Daniel works under Bob, Bob works under boss, right? So here we have 4. 7, that is Luis, works under Daniel, Daniel works under Bob, and Bob works under the boss, right? So here we have all these. If you see John, right? So John works under Alice, but Alice is the manager herself, right? So this won't be included. Angela is the boss herself. So you see, this is how, and this is what we need to do. So, and this is the output. Okay. So what we can do, since we are given only one table, and if you think the concept of primary key and foreign key, manager key is basically referring back to the employee ID column, right? So manager ID column is basically acting as a foreign key within the table itself, right? So this is a classic case of self joins, right? So when in a given table, a second column, is referencing back to one of the other columns in the table, right? So then to get more information, we can do self join. So what is self join? We join a table on itself, right? On only one thing that we need to keep in mind while doing self join is that you need to like name the tables in different manners, right? So let's start and jump on building the query, right? So from the employees table, right? From the employees table, and let's alias it as E1, we left to join another employees table. Here we alias it as E2 because we are doing a self join. So we need to name the same table in different manners on what we are joining on. So from the first table we are taking the manager ID, and from the second table we are taking the employee ID. So on E1 dot manager ID is equal to E2 dot employee ID. Okay, so let me just copy this so that I can explain it, what is happening at this particular stage. So this is what we have right now, right? And after so all this comes from E1. So like this is the table E1 dot employee ID, E1 dot employee name, E1 dot manager ID, and then once we do join, right? So what is basically happening? So 1 is going to find in the second table, oh, so there is 1, so here it would be the manager ID is 1. For 3 it is going to find 3. For 1 again it is going to find 1, right? Then for 2 it is going to find, oh, okay, so for 2 the manager ID was 1. For 4 the manager ID is 2, right? For 3 the manager ID is 3, right? For 8 manager ID is 3, right? And then for 1 the manager ID is 1. So now this is E2. So let me just copy this so that I can show you guys what is being done at this point of the query. So right, so this is the table, right? So let's consider this as E1 and this as E2, right? So what we are doing, E1 dot manager ID and E2 dot employee ID. So when we are doing a left join, so when the cursor goes on row 1 and says, okay, in manager ID of this table E1 we have 1, it goes to E2 and tries to find out, oh, okay, so employee ID 1 we have a match. So what is the these 3 columns will be returned and the manager ID is going to be 1. For 3 it will find a match, manager ID is 3. For 1 again it will find a match, the manager ID is 1. For 2 it will find a match, Bob, and the manager ID is 1, right? For 4 Daniel, right? So here 4 it will find a match and the manager is 2. Similarly for 3, right? So 3 it will find a match and manager is 3. So similarly here we will be having 3 more columns, again employee ID, employee name, and manager ID, but those would be E2 dot employee ID, E2 dot employee name, and E2 dot manager ID. So now we have 3 more columns in this. Again, when we do a join this, okay, so let me write down what after joining what would the manager IDs be, right? So for this 1 it would again come out to be 1, right? For this 3 it is going to come out 3 because here it will find employee ID 3, manager ID is 3, right? So for 1 again 1, right? For 2 it is going to find this match, the employee ID is 1, so 1, right? For 4 it is going to find out this match and the manager ID is 2, so 2. For 3 it is going to find out again 3, right? For 8 it is going to find out, oh okay, so and the manager ID is 3. And then finally for 1, so it will find out 1 and the manager ID is 1 right now. So after performing this join, so these are going to be the manager IDs of E2, right? So E2 dot manager ID is basically these ones. Now what will happen is that okay, so let me remove this part and try to show you. So wait, so basically okay, so let me okay, so let me just copy this here so that I can show you what is going on at this stage, right? So okay, so let's consider this as E1 and this as E2, right? So let me just, see, when we are doing a left join on E1 dot manager ID and E2 dot employee ID, what is basically going to happen? So for cursor 1, right? So cursor 1 is row 1, so it is going to be 1, like this row 1 boss, and manager ID is even dot manager ID is 1, and then it will try to go, oh okay, so we have a match here, so it will find, so I am just using this pipe to demonstrate that okay, after this we have whatever we are getting are from E2 column, E2 table, right? So again it will find a match. Okay, so since it found a match in employee ID 1, so 1 boss manager ID is 1, right? Similarly for row 2, 3 Alice 3, right? So it is going to find a match, so 3 is going to win. Oh okay, nice. So 3 Alice 3, right? For this one 1, right? So 2 Bob 1, what it is going to find? 1 you will find a match, so 1 boss 1, so you find 1 boss 1, right? Similarly for if we go with 4, so line 4 is 4 Daniel 2 pipe, and then what is happening? So for 2, right? So for 2 it will find a match, so oh okay, so employee ID, so 2 Bob manager ID is 1, right? Then for line 5th, right, I'm just showing you so that we are able to understand the logic behind it and how joins work and why I am writing a certain kind of logic in the end, because at the end we need to use where clause to keep only certain rows. So how do we come up with that logic, right? So similarly for 7 Louise 4, so here there will be a match, so 4 Daniel 2, 4 Daniel 2. Similarly for 8 John 3, there will be a match. So 3 Alice 3. For 9 Angela 8, there will be a match. So 8 John 3. And finally 77 Robert 1, and then there will be a match of 1 boss 1. So we have, like, after performing a disjoin, we have these values, right? So here it is even dot employee id, even dot employee name, even dot manager id, e2 dot employee id, e2 dot employee name, e2 dot manager id. Now since it is mentioned, since here we are still having such rows where it is not like 1, right? So the manager id is not 1, and since it is mentioned that the indirect relation will not exceed 3 managers as the company is small, so what we can do is we can still perform, because we still need to look at these ones, right? To see whether they work under someone who works under the boss or they don't. So what we can do is, again we can do a left join, another table employees, name it as E3 on, what do? You take E2 dot manager IDs, so these values, and then join on E3 dot employee ID, just like this one, right? So E3 dot manager ID is equal to E2 dot employee ID, right? So once you do this, so now here values will start coming from. Okay, so let me just format it so that we understand it better. Okay. Okay, so now let's consider this as E3, right? Because all the tables are same, right? So this is now E3. Now it will go and look, okay, so 1, it will find a match, 1 boss 1, right? So we write 1 boss 1. Similarly for 3 Alice 3, right? For 1 boss 1 boss 1, right? So for again 1 boss 1, right? For 2 it will find, oh okay, so 2 Bob 1, so 2 Bob 1. So basically what is this meaning? So Luis works under someone whose employee ID, who is a manager, whose employee ID is 4, who is basically Daniel works under Bob, right? And Bob works under 1, so that is boss. So this is what this means, right? So we are now getting that indirect relations by performing joins, right? Similarly for Alice, again 3 Alice 3 Alice 3 and 1 boss 1, right? So 1 boss 1. Now one simple question, do we need to perform another join? So the answer is no. Why? Because here it says the indirect relation between managers will not exceed 3 managers, right? So basically if you see, this was the first, so these are the employees and these are their managers, right? So first manager, second manager, third manager. So the relation is not going to be after this, right? So if we don't have one in the manager ID by this time, then like perhaps that person is either the manager itself, or they do not work directly or indirectly under the boss, right? So this is what we have. Okay, let me remove this. And okay, so now this we need to only keep certain rows, right? So where certain rows means the because the question is we need to report the employee ID of all employees that work directly or indirectly under the head of the company. Head of the company has manager ID 1, right? So we only keep those rows where E3 dot manager ID is equal to 1. So E3 dot manager ID is this column, and 1 means indirectly or directly the person was working under the head of the company, right? So what it will do, this will remove these rows, right? Since here we remove these. Now again, if you see in the output, boss works under boss, right? So it does not make sense, right? So, and that is not in our output, right? So what we need to do is basically we need to include another where clause, or basically another condition to filter out such rows where the, like, you can write it in any way, but like what I think is, like, if in your first employee table, if your employee ID and manager ID was 1, you can drop those rows. Let me know what other and condition can be written here, or filtered condition can be written here to do the same thing, right? So and even dot employee ID is not equal to even dot manager ID. So here if you see, all these are different except this, right? So it will remove this row. And finally, what do we need to return? We return the employee IDs, right? So select even dot employee ID. And this is, and do we, the order of the result does not matter. And let me remove this. Let us go ahead and run this to see what happens. run this and see what happens. So yeah, so this is accepted. Let me go ahead and submit it to see what happens. So yeah, this is accepted, it is a success, and this is how we solve this question. So you see, reading the question carefully, going through the examples will really help you in formulating this. I know there would be another ways to do this. Let me know in the comment section if you found another better way of doing this, or doing this using window functions, or any other method that you think does not involve joins, or if it involves joins, involves another kind of join, so that it is more efficient. So yeah, let me know in the comment section. Hopefully this video was useful to you guys. If it was, let me know in the comment section as well. And until then, I will see you guys in the next video.